Okay, so the last thing that we're going to deal with on our camera that allows you to change the exposure or affect the exposure, or the way the picture is going to look, is the ISO on the camera. Now, the ISO, in this case, makes the sensor more sensitive to light or less sensitive to light. So when it's more sensitive to light, it needs less light coming in. And when it's less sensitive to light, it needs more light coming in. So it's kind of opposite of the shutter and aperture. Now, ISO comes from film, and back in the days when we had film, there was little crystals on the film, and they would expose to the light when the light comes through. So when we wanted a faster film, we had to actually buy film that was a faster ISO or higher ISO number that made it a faster film. So when we wanted faster film, we had to actually load in faster film into the camera. Now, with digital, we just changed the ISO so we can do it between frames. You couldn't do that before. You had to shoot the whole roll of film and then get a faster speed film. You want faster speed film for when you're shooting at night or when you're shooting in a room or something like that, because it makes it much easier to make an exposure that allows you a faster shutter speed so you can hold the camera while you're taking the photograph. Now, in the film days, the fastest ISO that we had was around 1600. You could push process it to 3200. And generally, when you went on a higher ISO, you got what's called grain. And we called it grain because the actual little particles in the emulsion would actually be bigger. Those little grains would be bigger. And when you push process it to the next step up, it would actually swell those grains up even more so they'd actually get larger through the chemical process. Now, on digital cameras, when we adjust the ISO up, we don't add any more grain to the picture. We don't put grain on our sensor. What happens is the sensor becomes much more sensitive to light. And sometimes the sensor gets too sensitive and it adds artifacts into the picture. And these artifacts we call noise. And noise generally appears in the darker parts of the picture, but it can appear in other parts too. So as the ISO goes up, you get more and more noise. Now, noise can be also affected by underexposure of an image or overexposure of an image, but the main thing that affects the noise is the ISO. So when you adjust the ISO up, you increase the noise that's going to be in the picture. And it's basically just artifacts that are appearing in the picture. So the ISO you use in conjunction with the shutter and aperture. So at night, you want to set your ISO to a higher number so that it allows you to take the picture of the Milky Way, or take a picture of a night sky, or take a picture of a downtown scene at night. So you can get a faster shutter speed or get more depth of field out of using your f-stop. So we use the ISO in conjunction with the other two. Most of the time you want to shoot the ISO at the lowest number to prevent degrading the image through noise. Sometimes you might want the noise in there. But the cool thing about digital is that in the film days, when you had grain in the picture, you were stuck with that. You couldn't get rid of the grain because when you made the picture, you actually enhanced the grain. You made the grain more predominant. But in digital, we have all kinds of post-processing that we can take care of and get rid of all of that noise in the image. So it's kind of nice to have that. So again, the ISO, the lower the number, the less sensitive the sensor is to light, and the higher the number, the more sensitive the sensor is to light. So the higher the number, you can use either a faster shutter speed or a higher f-stop in conjunction with raising up the ISO. So those are the three things that we need to make a proper exposure, to adjust our exposure on the camera, to adjust the way the picture looks in the camera. Now we're going to talk about how all three of those things combine in the next video.